Yeah.
So once the session starts.
Okay, so let's start. Mini, can you help me move the slides?
Yeah. It seems to have got stuck.
Press escape and again, a full screen.
No, Neetu. I would suggest you could possibly, it's not moving.
Okay.
Some technical challenge. Yeah.
I've asked you for a remote control, please. Can you give me that?
Yeah, 1 second. Yeah, done.
Thank you. Okay. So, introducing HRPros to all of you. HRPros is a community. We have been around for the past 5 years, and we are a group of professionals who are trying to collaborate together so that we are able to create higher value for our customers. Okay, our clients. Mini, I would request you not to move that so that I get a chance, not to move the screens, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. So we are trying to create a platform so that we become the go-to organization, which is for all your people and HR, for your people and business related needs as such. So towards that, what we have done is created different centers of excellences amongst all of us. And you will see that each member of our community comes in with a specific area of expertise, and we are able to collaboratively offer that to our clients. So the first one that we have here, okay, is the talent acquisitions COE. We obviously, as HR people, you can know this is one of the starting points for any organization. So we have our members who are experts in recruitment and across multiple industries and from mid to senior level hiring. We've got specialists who are again helping our potential clients on acquiring the right kind of resources that they want for their organizations across the country as such. The next one we have is the coaching and mentoring. Here, we've got a whole panel of coaches and mentors who work with different sizes of organization, be it a large SME, a startup, a solopreneur, or a large corporates. And we focus around leadership, executive coaching, or organizational coaching also. Entrepreneurship coaching is another area that we focus upon within this segment. The next one is the L&D COE. So we've got a very strong team of professionals who are focusing on L&D. Again, these Mini is a part of it, which is focusing on POSH is one of the areas. Aside from that, we also have organizations who are focusing on creating high performance teams, leadership communication, soft skill presentations. And I think we've got one coming up with technical skills also. So that's another strong COE within our community. The next one, the fourth one here, COE that we have is the consulting team. And these are the ones where we've got people with 30, 40 years of experience individually and maybe collaboratively. I think we have crossed 200 years of experience. Focusing on people practices, on diversity inclusions, on various HR-based audits, virtual CHRO services, etc. And the last COE that we have is the HR tech. This is where we have organizations who are tech specialists in the space of HR. We've got people who focus on payroll solutions, total HRM solutions, HR analytics, which some of you may have attended our last webinar was on HR analytics, on using analytics in acquisition. So we've got also other service providers or product companies who are in the space of employee assistance and shared services. So as a whole, you see, we have expertise on different facets of the people and the business functions of an organization. Each of these have a panel of specialists who focus on, who come in with at least on an average of 20-25 years of experience. This is just a screenshot of some of the members we've already growing. We will be having a lot more. You will see a lot more in our next webinar. So with this, I am going to be handing the mic over to Amitabh, who's a moderator, to introduce our speaker. Amitabh, over to you.
Thank you, Neetu, so much. Thank you, Neetu, so much. So for this webinar, we have Mini. Actually, she has a different name, Mini Nilkund, but we all call her Mini. So for making it easier for us to address her, and we can even during the call also we can call her that also whenever you have a question. No issues with her. So a lot of diversity and professionals come from an HR background. But we are fortunate to have somebody who has come from an operations background, and Mini has had a lot of experience working with different type of organization as far as the operations field is concerned. She has worked for telecom, she has worked for DTH, she has worked for a BPO, and she has worked for a TPO also. So she understand, actually from the perspective that what actually goes on onto a floor and how we can implement, act in a organization from an operations perspective. And she has been running her own consultancy called MN Consulting for the past 5 years and has been focusing on POSH Act and diversity. She's a certified diversity and equity professional, and she has an experience of almost 18 years in working in the POSH committees in different organizations. So she's somebody who has actually seen, how the act has evolved before in its previous avatar as the Shaka guidelines and to the current statutory framework in terms of POSH guidelines and all. She will take us through the journey also. And presently, she is empaneled as a POSH consultant with a large organization. In addition to that, she also conducts a number of workshops on training the internal team on how to be sensitized toward this POSH Act, training of ICC, conducting internal inquiries, and he takes care of the whole gamut of activities. And when you can change it, and a little bit about myself. Change the slide. Yes. So, okay, it's okay. So I'm Amitabh. I work as an HR professional, and after almost 25 years of corporate journey, wherever last 8 years was as head of HR for a Japanese multinational, I've been running my own consulting for the past 8 years, supporting organization in both India, UAE, and Singapore with various aspects of HR. So I primarily focus on virtual CHRO services and talent acquisition. And over to you, Mini. And the format will be that, there will be a smart, discussion, and Mini will explain you some part of the guidelines, and then we will keep the floor open for questions at the end of each sections. So anytime you feel like you're having a questions, don't wait for it to be, asked at the end of the webinar. Please put it on the chat box, and I will ask Mini on your behalf. Or you can even unmute also if there is requirement for any other further clarification. Thank you. Yes, Mini, over to you.
Thank you, Neetu. Thank you, Amitabh, for that mini introduction. Good afternoon to all of you. And it's such a wonderful evening to be associated with all of you in a POSH interaction session. Let us make it as interactive as possible so there is greater takeaway for all of us. When we talk about POSH, it could mean so many things, right? But here, when I'm talking about POSH, it means prevention of sexual harassment at workplace. So when we talk about workplace, why is it so important that there be an environment which is safe from harassment, safe from workplace harassment, safe from any form of sexual harassment? So this was not thought through for a very long time in our judiciary system, and it took a while for us to recognize this. Neetu, over to the next line. Okay. So most of us, I think, would be aware of the Bhauri Devi case, which happened in the state of Rajasthan. And this is where the entire Vishaka guidelines took shape. I would spend 30 seconds to make you understand where this all emancipated from. So when we are talking about Bhavri Devi's case, this was a rape case that took place in 1992. Bhavri Devi was one of the counselors or Sathin in the state of Rajasthan, who used to go and counsel the society at large on the perils of child marriage. And one of the family, the Gujar family, they prevailed on her. They conducted the marriage, and there were a few men from the family who gang raped Bhavri Devi. Now, she was one of the employees of the state of Rajasthan, but she didn't get any type of support from the state. So Bhavri Devi, she approached the local panchayat, and the local panchayat gave the judgment in favor of the perpetrators. Bhavri Devi took things at her hand. She went to the nearest state of Jaipur, the city of Jaipur, and she met a few women organizations who were working for the empowerment of women. 3 such women organizations, they decided to represent the rape case of Bhavri Devi, and they filed a PIL with the Supreme Court. PIL stands for Public Interest Litigation. So they filed a PIL and they named it Vishaka. 5 years down the line, in the year 1997, Supreme Court gave judgment in favor of Bhavri Devi, and it was called as Vishaka Guidelines. Even today, when we talk about the POSH law, it emancipates from the Vishaka Guidelines. So 1997 is when the Supreme Court recognized the need for a governance around sexual harassment at workplace in its landmark judgment of Vishaka versus State of Rajasthan. And Supreme Court also acknowledged then in 1997 that sexual harassment is a violation of human rights. So constituted legally binding guidance according to right to equality and dignity. And that is when, in the framework of Vishaka Guidelines, it defined what sexual harassment is at workplace. In the context of Bhavri Devi, Supreme Court said that as an employer, it was the duty of the state of Rajasthan to take care of safety of Bhavri Devi. Even if at that stage it had not happened, subsequently, when she wanted to fight this case, state of Rajasthan did not support her in this endeavor. So it said that the responsibility shifted from an individual to an organization. So the Supreme Court, in its judgment, said that it is the responsibility of every employer to provide a safe work environment for women at workplace. It introduced also the concept of redressal mechanism as part of the Vishaka Guidelines. Redressal mechanism would mean any woman who is harassed sexually at workplace can seek redressal through the internal committee. So the responsibility of constituting the internal committee also vests with the employer. In the subsequent slides, I would also be covering about the responsibilities of an employer. After 1997 till 2013, there wasn't much that happened. So those 16 years, while the Vishaka Guidelines was there, and the Supreme Court in its judgment had said that this should be introduced pan-India at all workplaces. But where we failed was the governance around it. So from 1997 to 2013, many employers chose not to have a redressal mechanism, not to have a sexual harassment policy at workplace, and women continued facing sexual harassment at workplace till the Medha Kotwal amendment that happened in 2013. And the POSH law, which came into being 9th of December 2013, was on account of the Medha Kotwal amendment. Next slide, Neetu, please. So the Mehta Kotwal Amendment had three major things that it spoke about. One, it mentioned that the internal committee, which is responsible for redressal, is as good as the civil court under the Code of Civil Procedure, 1908. It also mentioned that the committee can summon not just the complainant and the respondent in an endeavor to investigate the case. It has the right to summon any employee within the organization if the committee feels that person will be able to throw some light during the course of the investigation. And the third amendment, it said that once the recommendation post the investigation comes from the internal committee, the employer cannot tweak the recommendation. It has to be executed in spirit. So these were the three amendments that came up in the Mehta Kotwal Amendment in 2013. So then we need to pause and think, what then is sexual harassment at workplace? There is a clear-cut defined framework by law on sexual harassment at workplace. What we need to understand is this is one of the few behavioral laws. So there can be a lot of subjectivity around this. Whenever there is behavior, there is something called as the code of conduct, which I am okay by, or the other person is okay by, or not okay by. This is one of the few behavioral law in existence. So it is important for us to understand perspectives of sexual harassment. So this has been defined by law again, and the sexual harassment as defined by law is sexual harassment at workplace has been defined as including unwelcome sexually determined behavior. Who decides whether this is a sexual harassment? The person at the receiving end or the harasser? The law very clearly says that it is the person at the receiving end who decides whether it is a sexual harassment or not. He feels that behavior unwelcome. So it includes unwelcome sexually determined behavior. It could be direct or it could be implied. The behavior could be direct one or it could be an implied one. What is a direct behavior? For example, the person is sending messages which has sexual connotation to it, or some forwards which has a link which is totally unwarranted and has sexual messaging to it. These could be direct. Implied could be something like, say, stalking. It is an implied sexual behavior, right? So the behavior could be direct or it could be implied as physical contact and advances. At workplace, any form of physical contact and advances which the recipient feels was unwarranted or was unwelcome can amount to sexual harassment. A demand or request for sexual favor, we also call it as quid pro quo, which also means this for that. In my experience, I've mainly seen this between reporting structures. So the manager will promise a higher. Can I request everyone to go on mute, please? Thank you.
I can just put your questions in the chat box and we will come back to you and answer as soon as the segment is over.
After this segment, I would be entertaining questions. So please keep it ready. I'll answer them. Okay. So we were talking about a demand or request for sexual favor. So a reporting manager could promise a promotion or a higher increment for the reportee in return for a sexual favor. That is also sexual harassment under the law of POSH. Sexually colored remarks. It could be okay for one person to compliment and have some sexual connotation to that compliment. The person at the receiving end might not be okay by such a comment. Any form of sexually colored remarks also amounts to sexual harassment. Showing pornography, one colleague watching pornography and insists that the second colleague also watch along with him or her amounts to sexual harassment. The person can go and complain to the internal committee and seek redressal. Any other unwelcome physical, verbal, or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. So when we in the committee receive a complaint, we first check whether that complaint falls under the purview of sexual harassment. So any action which falls under these criteria that we just discussed amounts to sexual harassment, and the lady can seek redressal, can walk up to the committee and give a complaint in writing. A little bit on the forms of sexual harassment. It's generally either quid pro quo or hostile work environment. So hostile work environment and workplace harassment is very different. Hostile work environment is creating a hostile environment in such a way that it amounts to a sexual harassment. Like the boss could be repeatedly asking the subordinate for a date outside for dinner. She refuses. His behavior changes towards her because she is not heeding to the request. And over a period of time, she feels very uncomfortable working under a boss like this. It's creating a hostile work environment. This also amounts to sexual harassment. So any form of hostile work environment that gets created at workplace and any form of quid pro quo also are the two common forms that we get to see at workplace. Neither, next slide, please. What ecosystem are we talking about when we talk about the POSH framework? When you have an internal committee, when you have a sexual harassment policy, which is governing all the employees, the POSH law has a slightly different definition of employee and workplace and employer. So when we talk about workplace, it can be any workplace. It can be a government office, it can be a private company, it can be a public sector, central, state, organizations, hospitals, anywhere where we are conducting business and it is a workplace and the business has 10 plus employees, have to necessarily have an internal committee. That's what the law says. A dwelling place or a house is also a workplace. To the extent the law expands, the canvas that it covers is much larger than we expect. It also talks about if I travel on work to another place, that becomes an extended workplace. If I am using the transportation provided to me by the employer for pickup and drop, that becomes an extended workplace. So any form of harassment in any of the workplaces amounts to sexual harassment. So when we talk about an internal committee, I can take a complaint to an internal committee if the incident has happened at the workplace or extended workplace, or the two people involved are working for the same company. Okay. Aggrieved women need not necessarily be an employee of your organization. I could have come there for an interview and I face some form of sexual harassment by the recruitment officer. I have the empowerment to go and complain. As a woman, I have the empowerment to go and complain about this sexual harassment with the internal committee of the organization. And why is it so important? Because for the organization, every employee is an ambassador towards this initiative. If I am complaining about an employee in the organization, there is a respondent there, right? The person who's making the complaint is the complainant. The person against whom the complaint is made is the respondent. So if I do not bring it to the notice of the internal committee, even as a visitor, that I had faced sexual harassment at your workplace, then we are nurturing a respondent within the system. So I need not necessarily be an employee of your organization. I could be a visitor. I could have come there for an interview. I could be a vendor employee. I could be a regular employee. I could have come there for a project work. I could be a temporary employee. All of these employees will come under the purview of the internal committee for your organization. And an aggrieved woman from any of these segments can come and complain to the internal committee of your organization. The other, we keep talking about it's employer's responsibility to drive this initiative, right? So then who is the employer? The person responsible for management, supervision, and control of that business is the employer. Neetu, next slide, please. Okay, any questions on what we covered?
Yeah, so Mini, there are actually 3 questions, and let me put it across. One question is, I think that's a very common, question which always gets asked about it. Is the POSH Act a gender neutral act in that sense?
Wonderful question.
Yeah.
So the law, when it came up with the POSH law, it talked about Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013. Even till now, the law talks about women complaining about sexual harassment. Having said that, the law also says that this is a framework which has to be driven by the employer. The responsibility rests with the employer. So the employer can decide whether he or she would like to have a gender-specific policy or a gender-neutral policy. Gender-specific policy is what law entails today. It still talks about harassment against women. A gender-neutral policy would mean any employee in the organization can complain to the internal committee for redressal. So it is it's under the jurisdiction of the employer to decide whether he or she would like to have a gender-specific policy or a gender-neutral policy.
I think that's a wonderful explanation, which we have received. And there are a lot more questions coming, so maybe will have to stay back for a couple of more minutes to answer some of the questions.
No problem.
And one question was about, what exactly was the Medha case?
Medha Kotwal case.
Medha, yes,
Yeah.
Medha Kotwal.
Medha Kotwal case. Okay.
Yeah.
So Medha Kotwal case was an amendment that happened, and Medha Kotwal was working for an NGO called Alochana. While the Vishaka guidelines were supposed to be implemented across all organizations, it wasn't the case. So she was receiving a lot of complaints from women employees who worked in different organizations, who came up to Medha Kotwal and since she was working in an NGO, expressed their displeasure of the Vishaka guidelines not being followed at the employer's end. So Medha Kotwal collated all of these letters, converted it into a writ petition, and presented it to the Supreme Court, bringing it to the notice of the Supreme Court, saying, while there is a Vishaka guidelines, there is no governance around this, right? So what doesn't get measured doesn't improve, right? That's a saying in quality. It is important there be a governance, and Supreme Court took cognizance of this writ petition by Medha Kotwal, and there was a bill that was passed both in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, and this became a legislative act, December 2013.
So we still have, some more questions, and I'm not getting the context, but the question is that does it also cover domestic maids worker
Yes.
as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll take a
So is
minute
it-
there.
Yeah, please.
So how does this law cover the entire canvas of India, if we were to talk about our country? So the law says that the governance has to be two-folded. One, through the IC, which is through the employer. The second one is the local committee. The local committee is spearheaded by the district officer. So an employee who works for an organization where there are less than 10 employees, so the employer does not have an internal committee, the lady can go and complain in the local committee, which is available in every district office. So the local committee governs the rest of India, if I can say that. And the companies where you do not have an internal committee, the employees can complain with the local committee.
Fair enough. And
So the household
uh,
chores,
okay.
women who help us with the household chores are also working women, right? Women who work for, unskilled laborers, these people can also go and complain to the local committee.
So a couple of more questions related to that. I'm not getting the context of the question, but I will still repeat the question. Maybe the person who has asked this question can clarify. Will complaints from person other than aggrieved also taken in for further consideration? I'm not sure what context it is asked. If you can just type it out, what context this question is, we'll be happy to answer it because I'm not getting the context of this question. Then another question relates to POSH committee. Please hold on to your question. We will answer in the subsequent section about the POSH committee. We'll come back and answer this question. And another very interesting question, I think it's a very interesting scenario which comes up is, if a relative female of an employee is harassed in the office, can she complain? My answer is yes, but
Yes.
many can, yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And
so she's a visitor, right? She is a visitor, and a visitor at the workplace. So where has the harassment taken place? At the workplace, right? So I could be a visitor. I could not be an employee, but coming there for an interview. So many other reasons, I am there at your workplace and this happens to me. I can take it up with the internal committee of the organization. Abdul had a question, I think.
Now the question is clear. Now the question is clear, and I'm getting the question clearly. So what exactly the question is that there is an incident which has happened in the office. Now the person, the sufferer, is too scared for whatever reason it may be, is unwilling to come forward and register the complaint.
Yeah.
So can somebody else register the complaint? That is the question.
Wonderful question.
I think I hope I have got it right.
Yes. Okay. So the answer is yes. So if I am a colleague of another colleague of mine who I see is going through some harassment, it could be creating a hostile work environment for all you know, which is also sexual harassment. But she, for some reason, hesitates to make a complaint. While I'm trying to counsel her, cajole her, she doesn't. So with her permission, I can go and speak about this to the internal committee member. The internal committee member also play the role of counselors. I can go and trigger this with the internal committee. The internal committee member would speak to her, understand her reservations for registering a return complaint, and then she would take a complaint and that will be investigated. But please understand, like I mentioned, this internal committee is also a quasi-judicial body. So there are certain things that we need to take care of. One of the things is the investigation will be done by the committee only when the complaint is given in writing. I cannot go to a police station and say, I want to lodge an FIR without giving a written complaint, right? Similarly, in the internal committee, if you want the redressal to happen, it is important that we give a complaint letter in writing. As a good practice, many companies also have a common ID, POSH Act, the company name, and the internal committee members are mapped to this POSH ID. I, from an official mail ID, can send a complaint mail to this POSH ID. That would also be considered as good as a written complaint. But there has to be a complaint registered.
Only one question related to that only. Can we have a universal phone line also number across
Yes.
India?
It is a good practice to have,
It's a good
definitely.
practice. Thank you so much. And Archana, I will answer your question little later in the next segment and about how the POSH committee will be formed. So please hold on to your question till such time. Yeah, Mini, over to you for the next segment.
No, Abdul had raised his hand. I think he had a question.
No, I think we have already answered his question. Yes.
Achha, okay, fair.
Okay, I want to share here. If anybody, we don't have the time to answer the questions now. I have put the WhatsApp group link in the chat. You can join the WhatsApp group and ask your questions there also. For any reason, if there, we don't have the time to address all the questions, Mini is also will be there. She will make sure that she answers also questions.
Definitely,
so
yes.
The engagement will continue beyond the webinar. Okay, let's move ahead.
Okay. Something that everybody wants to know. What is this internal committee? What is it all about? Why does an employer have to have an internal committee for redressal? Why cannot HR handle it? HR in any case is responsible for employee engagement, right? So why cannot an HR function make do with the redressal? The POSH law very clearly states that there are certain norms that we need to follow in the way we are constituting an internal committee. First and foremost, the minute the organization has 10 plus employees, an internal committee is mandated under Section 4. So the Section 4, you don't have to remember the section numbers, but I'm just conversationally mentioning it. Section 4 of the Act talks about constituting the internal committee. Who constitutes this? It is the responsibility of the employer. And subsection 2 also says that the internal committee should have a presiding officer. It has to be a woman employed at a senior level at workplace. Some organizations might not have a woman at a senior cadre. In such a case, the employer can have a presiding officer from one of the other organization that he or she would have. Or you can get somebody from some other organization to officiate as a presiding officer. The person who is responsible for every activity of the internal committee is the presiding officer. In the local committee, also you have a chairperson, and in the internal committee, it is the presiding officer. What are the specifications of the internal committee? Like I said, 10 plus employees, we need to have an internal committee. There has to be an equal representation of men and women. It has to be 50% women, nothing less than that. And rest of it would be men. The law also talks about an external member in the internal committee who brings in the requisite know-how of the subject and also is a neutral party during the discussion and the conclusion of the investigation. The question that I always get asked is, if I have branches and my presence is in pan-India, do I need to have an internal committee everywhere? Why can't I just have one in the head office? The answer is no. We need to have an internal committee even in your branches the minute the branch touches 10 plus employees. The presiding, if you do not have a senior cadre women in the branches, then the presiding officer from the head office can officiate as a presiding officer for the branch. Yeah, Nitu, next slide. Any questions on internal committee? There's something we need to understand is the minute there is a business, it could be any form of business. To run that business, you have people. And if it is 10 plus people, the law says internal committee has to be formed. The organization could have all men, fair enough. The client and the vendor, you could be dealing with women. So the law talks about 10 plus employees. It doesn't say women or men in what proportion. No. 10 employees, I need to have an internal committee. Yes, Abdul, you had some question.
Yeah, so my question was relating to, for example, if there are 11 employees in the company and there is only one female employee, so how will the ICC be constituted, and how many people from external can I bring in such a case?
Okay. So if there is only in an organization only one woman and 10 men, then the lady will definitely be there. The company can always take the external member as a lady and have 2 men. The minimum requirement of the committee is 4. So you don't need more than 4 people for a capacity of 10, 11 employees, right? So that is good enough. Have I answered your question?
Yes, yes, you did.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So I think one of the questions which was asked in the earlier session was that, for an organization which has, offices outside, one may be base location where they can form the committee, and they may have multiple offices across the different cities or different states. What should be the best way to go around implementing the ICC and all?
So one, of course, would be the head office, where you will have the committee, internal committee. Branches as well, when there is 10 plus employees, you need to have a committee there. Now, there is something called as a compliance on the POSH law. Well, supposing my head office is in Mumbai, branch office is in Bangalore and Chennai, I have to file the returns annually every January in Mumbai, in Bangalore, and in Chennai. And when I'm filing that return, I have to give the committee member's name for that branch. Well, supposing I'm sharing the presiding officer, so in Bangalore, for that branch, I would mention that presiding officer's name and the external member's name and the local committee member's name in that branch when I put up the posters at the workplace. Now,
we have some very interesting questions coming up, Mini.
Yeah.
And so, okay.
I'll just complete this, Amitabh, please. Okay. So some organizations, like for example, ITES, you have employees who are going abroad. Similarly, when it is an MNC, you have employees who are coming here. They could be foreigners, right? If it is an Indian employee who is posted, say, in US on a project or UK on a project, then the local law holds good. Similarly, when you have foreign employees, foreigners who come to India, they are generally taken through an orientation program on this, because the local law applies for them when they are in India. Nidhi, you had a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
There is a company, there is one of my clients who has 3 offices, and in each office he had 3 and 4 employees. So in total he has 10 employees, but in each location he has less than 10 employees. So does he need to actually comply with POSH laws?
So overall, his strength of employees is greater than 10.
Around 10, yes.
Yeah. So he could always have one in the head office as a compliance, and he need not have it in the branch office. He can map these committee members to the branch employees.
Okay.
Branch you need to have only when it is 10 plus. But when as a company he's filing the ROC, there is a compliance that he needs to adhere. So as a company, his total number of employees will show more than 10.
Yes.
So it is prudent to have an internal committee, at least in the head office, and the employees of the branches can complain to this committee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And there is one more company which has 20 male employees.
Yeah.
There is no female employee, so they are not able to form a committee.
Yeah.
So in that case, what should we do?
So in that case, you will have to, the employer will have to seek help from another company, presiding officer lady, and
Okay.
also ensure that the external member that they're taking on board be a lady.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem, Nidhu. Okay, so if there are no more
I think,
questions,
yeah,
Amitabh?
we can move on. Yeah, I
Can
think
we
there are
move-
some questions, but I think we also have to keep track of the time. So
Yeah.
we can take it at the end of the session, or
Yeah,
if we can post it on the
Sure,
WhatsApp.
sure. Yeah, when we spoke about Vishaka guidelines, 1997, when the Vishaka guidelines came into existence, we spoke about the responsibility shifting from an individual to the employer. So what does this mean? This means that as an employer, the employer has to take care of every nuance of the workplace to ensure that it is a safe work environment that the employees are working in. So I, as an employer, can choose to have a gender neutral policy, right? Or I can choose to have a gender specific policy, because law still is talking only about gender specific policy. But mostly, most of the organizations, as a good practice, are more gender sensitive and they want to have a gender neutral policy. Now, what are the responsibilities of the employer? Quite a few, in fact, because the entire gambit of the POSH framework rests on the shoulders of the employer. So it could be an employer or it could be a district officer who's going to spearhead the working of the local committee. So under the law, both the employer and the district officer, as the case may be, are obliged to create a workplace free of sexual harassment. When we are talking about sexual harassment policy, it is a subset of the HR policy. You upfront tell the employees how they are supposed to behave. Very, very important. Which behavior is not acceptable? I think it is very important to convey that. So it is important to create and communicate a detailed sexual harassment policy, which will have every aspect of the sexual harassment norms in it. Which behavior is acceptable, which behavior is not acceptable, what will be considered as a misconduct. Also have sexual harassment as one of the misconduct defined in the sexual harassment policy. The policy has to also very clearly state for the employee whether the organization is following a gender specific or a gender neutral policy. The law also talks about ensuring awareness within the system and orientation around this. It is just not enough that I have an internal committee and I have a policy and the employees are ignorant about it. I get confidence when I know that there is a framework on POSH that is being adopted within the organization, and I can be free from any fear with regard to sexual harassment. There has to be enough communication that happens within the organization. The employer also has a responsibility, like I mentioned, to constitute an internal committee in every workplace. Similarly, the district officer has to create a local committee in every district. That would mean that, for example, if I'm talking about Karnataka and there are 29 districts, there has to be 29 local committees. They in turn will send the annual report to the state. All the state governments in turn will send it to central. That's how it works. That's how the loop works. The law also mandates that the internal committee are trained both in skill and capacity. Let's understand, those members who are from the internal committee are not lawyers by profession, right? But we are handling a civil case that has come up for hearing as part of redressal. We need to understand the empowerment that we have as an internal committee when we are doing an investigation. So there is a clear laid down framework which talks about section 4, subsection 2, we talk about section 16, section 19. There are so many section numbers which govern this entire policy. And the law says that Randomly, somebody cannot sit in a committee and do a redressal session. They need to be trained to understand what entitlement they have, what purview do they need to operate on when they are conducting the investigation. Employees also have to be trained on POSH awareness. Very important. If I do not know what is sexual harassment, if I do not know what are the different types of sexual harassment, if I'm exposed to something like this, how would I know that this is sexual harassment? How would I know? How can I seek redressal? So these are small modules that need to be covered for the employees for their understanding about how this works. And last but not the least, it's also the employee's responsibility to prepare an annual report and report it to the respective district officer, who in turn will report it to the state, and state in turn will report it to the central. Nitu, next slide, please. Now, when I was talking about POSH framework, we spoke about internal committee. Internal committee, they go through an exhaustive 2 days training program, where they are taught the section numbers within which they conduct an investigation. They need to understand how they can look and analyze at evidences, because this is the entire process is on the premise of principles of natural justice, being fair and seen as being fair. So how do I understand, how I can analyze evidences? How do I read the body language of the people whom I am interrogating during the investigation? So the internal committee goes through an exhaustive 16 hours training. The entire POSH framework is spearheaded by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. And the training is very clearly laid down. It's a 16 hours training to equip the internal committee members to understand and investigate the redressal. So there are different ways of doing this training and awareness session. It could be a classroom session. It could be a webinar like what we are doing today. It could be e-learning programs. E-learning programs generally are adopted by very large organizations where you have a huge employee strength. So, in-person training becomes quite challenging. So they have the SaaS model, online tools, also called as e-learning. Through mailers, also awareness session, like when we were during the pandemic period, work from home option, most of the communication was done through mailers. There is also a requirement that there be enough display at the locations at the workplace of the POSH policy, posters talking about sexual harassment at workplace, and internal committee members' contact points, the mobile number of the committee members and their mail ID. So in the posters, you talk enough about zero tolerance on sexual harassment. You talk about the POSH ID to which the employees can send a complaint. These are the posters which we need to display at the workplace. Yeah, Nitu, next slide, please. Any questions on employers' responsibility that we just covered? Amitabh, do you have anything on the chat with regard to
Yeah,
this?
I don't have any other questions on that chat, but we would encourage the panel member if there is anything point, the participant, if there are any other questions they would like us to. There's one question, ma'am, do you conduct trainer program? Yes, we do conduct. And please, we will connect with you subsequent to the program. And if there's any requirement.
Can't hear you very clearly, Amitabh.
Yeah, so one question is that it was basically addressed to you. Do you conduct the training program for IC members? So yes, we do conduct,
Yes,
and we'll
we
connect
do.
with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've done a lot of trainings actually for small SMEs, medium segment, large corporates. We have trained quite a lot of internal committee members. We have conducted awareness session for employees. And we also help in consulting on how do you create the policy, how do you pick the right members in the internal committee, and be part of the investigation when there has been a redressal as an external member. We do all of this.
So one question which is very interesting is, can the complainant, once the complaint is registered, can the respondent resign?
Can the respondent resign? I think it is the respondent's prerogative whether he wants to resign. But on account of the investigation, if the incident was established and the respondent is found guilty, one of the recommendations from the internal committee could be termination of the respondent, but that would depend upon the severity of the case. I repeat, this is a behavioral law. Every incident of sexual harassment has to be seen in the right context. Two incidences might look similar, but might not be the case when you look at the evidence, when you look at the impact that it has had on the complainant. The law, because it is a behavioral law, repeatedly talks about impact versus intent. When an internal committee is conducting an investigation, we always look at the impact the incident has had on the complainant and not so much so the intent of the respondent.
Yeah, Sam, I think there is a lot of
Amitabh.
questions to you, Mini, was a person. I mean, especially for the training aspect, that if you can do in the trainer program or something like this, if we do plan for that, we will definitely let you know, and all the participants in our And one very interesting point which comes is, what is the process if employer himself is the respondent?
Yes. So, very, very interesting question.
Yeah, I know it's a tricky one, but yes.
That is two-folded. One, what if one of the internal committee member is a complainant or the respondent? The person has to step down from the committee and investigation would be conducted. If the presiding officer is a complainant, she also has to step down from being a presiding officer. And for this particular investigation case, we will form a committee, which is called as a quorum, to investigate a case, and an ad hoc presiding officer would be nominated for this particular case. Depending upon the outcome and the recommendation post the investigation, a call can be taken whether the presiding officer can be reinstated or not. Similar is the case with the employer. In case of an employer, it is generally the local committee which handles the investigation, or it could be a legal counsel which is sought from outside.
So, full of very interesting points which are there is, and I think although my answer would be yes, but I would still take your opinion. And one question is that, is the training of IC needs to be done in regular intervals?
Yes.
My answer would be yes.
Yes.
Because there are always updates and all. And if you're part of something, it's always good to have a regular training.
Yeah.
And that goes for everything, whether it is an IC or any other.
Yeah.
Yeah, hi Mini, this is Rekha here.
Yes, Rekha.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Can we display this POSH awareness and also the Sexual Harassment Act in the factory area?
You should. So wherever you have employees, working, it could be the floor area, it could be the factory where the production is happening. Your employees work from there. So posters have to be visible everywhere. It is definitely has to be visible in the front desk, possibly in the cafeteria where employees frequent more often, workplace. So everywhere in the workplace, you need to have posters. Very important, Rekha.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Mini.
No problem. So, Amitabh, we proceed.
Yeah, I think, sorry, mosquito fogging going on, so slight disturbance. No problem. So, I mean, I think the one question is again related to training. What should be the interval? I think a regular 6 months or 1 year updated after the first training is done. And as and when there is an update, that would be the ideal answer.
So the law is
And-
silent about, it only talks about regular trainings.
Yeah.
The law is silent about how frequently you need to conduct it. But from a compliance perspective, we need to ensure that all our employees go through the awareness program. The internal committee should at least go through refreshers every year after the first training of 16 hours. Very important. Similarly, you will have a few employees from the internal committee team who have resigned and left the organization. So you're backfilling, right? They also have to go through the complete training.
So I think if there are no further questions,
We can move to the
close it
next
off.
segment.
We'll just keep the floor open for another couple of minutes. And if there are any further questions. So we would just like to ask while we do, the people wait for the questions to come in. If I would just one question to the participants and please give us a thumbs up or on. If you feel that your expectations from this session have been met, and if there is something else you would like us to speak about in our subsequent webinars, please do come back. You can just type in your suggestions.
Can I move to the next segment? We are slightly pressed for time, Amita. If there
Yeah,
are
yeah,
no more
definitely.
questions.
Yeah.
Okay. We kept talking about POSH compliance. We spoke about POSH law. We said it is a legislative. So there are certain compliances that have to be met by the employer. One, of course, is the POSH policy. There has to be a compliance around this. So a clear-cut documentation, which is part of your HR policy, is the sexual harassment policy, which gives the complete perspective about what would be considered sexual harassment, which act or behavior amounts to sexual harassment, and whether sexual harassment is a misconduct. We need to specify that. Very, very important. One more thing is defining service rules. So when as an internal committee member, you are going to take a decision based on the intensity of the case and outcome of the investigation, when you are going to give recommendation for punishment, whether it is to the respondent or to the complainant in case it was wrong complaint. There are these punishments that we are talking about has to be clearly defined in the service rules. We have to conform to those service rules defined in the HR policy. Constituting the internal committee, we got into greater details on this. Awareness, IC capacity building in terms of training them for those 16 hours and regular refreshers, posters, annual reports. Annual report is something that has to be filed as a return with the district officer every January for the previous calendar year. So the cutoff period is January 31st. So between 1st and 31st of January, this return has to be filed, which will have specifications of how many cases had come up for hearing, how many cases were solved within the time frame which is defined by law, and if there was an extension beyond 90 days, what was the reason? So the internal committee members' names and the external committee members' name, all of these are part of the returns that we are supposed to be filing annually every January. Recently, there was an amendment, not very recent, I would say, where the law said that there has to be an updation report quarterly once to the board of directors for every quarter. So, as an empaneled member, I generally conduct these quarterly meetings with the internal committee of that company, which I'm empaneled with. And we basically discuss on updation, if any, on the law. The presiding officer would talk about how many cases we dealt with in that quarter, And this report, this minutes of the meeting is sent to the board of directors in their quarterly meeting. We need to understand also the seriousness of not complying with this law. It is not something that can be taken very lightly by any employer. One, because it is a legislation, and second, because this responsibility rests with the employer to ensure that they are compliant with the POSH law at workplace. So what are the penalties if not complied with? Can be subject to a penalty of 50,000. And what are those eventualities? Failure to constitute an internal committee, failure to act upon the recommendation of the internal committee, or failure to file an annual report to the district officer, or contravening or attempt to contravene or abetting contravention of the acts or rules which is laid down under the POSH law. If there is a repeat breach under the act, then this penalty becomes twice. And third time, if it still continues, then there can also be a cancellation, withdrawal, non-renewal of registration or license for carrying out the business activity. So it's quite severe. Any questions on compliance? Amitabh, you might want to check if there are any questions in the chat box.
No, not right now.
Which I need to
I think there are no change.
I have a
Okay.
question here.
Yeah.
Minimum.
Yeah.
One of the things that you told in the compliance part was about annual reports.
Yeah.
What I'm doing for now is with my clients that I encourage them to have a quarterly meeting with the ICC, irrespective of whether there's a case heard or not. And I have a few friends of mine in the labor department in state government of Karnataka. And in fact, when COVID started in 2020 in Bangalore, actually they were deputed from labor department. So I was already in touch with them. And so what they said was every quarter let them meet and prepare minutes of the meeting. And if there are no cases, there are no cases, done. But you file that report every quarter. Is that still the same procedure?
No, no,
I
no.
mean, is there any change?
No. Pandemic time, there was an exception, but you're supposed to be filing only the annual report. Annual report is mandated. Quarterly report, you do not have to file. The minutes of the meeting, of the discussion of the internal committee member and the external member every quarter needs to be presented to the board of directors who have a quarterly meet. So you don't have to file a return every quarter. You have to file it only annually once.
Okay. So during, before COVID also, I was in touch with the secretary of the labor department. And what was recommended to us was that send us a copy of it, you file a report with your respective office, and you send a copy to us along with the annual report. So what we have been doing is we have been doing both.
Yeah.
So probably being on
it's
the safer
always
side.
better to be on the safer side, where this law is concerned, because we should never get caught on the wrong footing.
Yeah,
what you're doing is good.
Told us.
Yeah, fair enough. Yes, Krishna Kumar, you had some question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So very interesting question. If your number of employees is less than 10, do you still need it, or?
You don't need a committee, but the employees would go to the local committee. Now, a small brief on the complaint bit. I have an IC because I have more than 10 employees, and I would expect my employees to come and register a complaint with my internal committee. Do I have any other avenues where I can go and register a complaint? As a citizen, the answer is yes. So I can go to the police station, file an FIR, and then come to the internal committee and register a complaint. There is something called as an online portal called as SHE-Box, Sexual Harassment Electronic Box. This is spearheaded by the Ministry of Women and Child Development. So any women facing sexual harassment can go online and register a complaint. At any given point of time, I can even go and view status of the complaint. How far has it gone, right? So I can either go to the she box and register a complaint. I can go to the police station and file an FIR. I can come to the internal committee. I can go to the social media, #MeToo movement, and talk about it. There are so many avenues I can go to. As a committee member, I cannot stop an employee from going to any other source to file a complaint. But that is the reason why the law says it is so important to communicate to your employees about the existence of this framework within the system. There is a time frame given by law. The investigation has to be conducted within 90 days. And more often than not, when you do it on a war footing, you are able to do it within 2-3 weeks. If I were to go and file an FIR, that would take ages. Correct? So there are different avenues for a person to go and register a complaint. And we as internal committee member or as an organization cannot stop that employee from doing that. But it is always better to have the knowledge. So the internal committee would definitely check with the complainant, have you filed the complaint anywhere else? Yeah.
Yeah, hi Mini, this is Rekha here again.
Yeah, Rekha.
Yeah, how long will it take for a POSH committee to readdress the issue?
It depends how some people do
Is there
it.
any certain period
Yeah, there is a time frame. The law says 90 days.
for any organization?
Yeah, for a committee to address a redressal and investigate and close the case, the time frame is 90 days.
Okay, yeah.
So
Thank
when we
you.
talk about POSH law, there is nothing called as specific organization. It holds good for all organizations. So that law is common, whether it could be a private sector, it could be a public sector, it could be a stadium for all you know, or any place of work. The law is the common factor and it is 90 days. Yeah, Nidhi.
Not very clear with my question, which I had posted, that companies having less than 10 employees, do they need to file annual return? Do they need to have sensitization trainings? All this, do they need to do?
All of this, Nidhi, you will do when you have an internal committee. In the absence that you do not have an internal committee, you do not have to do it. But the employee, when the employee faces a sexual harassment, can go and complain to the local committee.
Okay. So can I draft a POSH policy at least for the organization?
You can do that. As a good practice, you can do that because, you never know when it is going to cross 10 employees, right?
Right.
So you can do that. I have certain clients where I'm empaneled with, where they have branches where they have 6-7 employees. But when they are doing an IC training, they would have picked up 2 employees from that branch and trained them so that there is readiness from the company perspective.
Right.
Yeah. So the discretion of how you want to logistically, execute all of this rests with the employer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one more question I'm not very clear on. If an investigation is going on, the complainant has made a complaint, and in between the investigation, if the respondent wants to leave the organization, can the company allow, because there's a case on him which is going on?
Yeah. So generally, the company does not allow or does not give a relieving letter when there is a case pending. But more often than not, the respondent just disappears. What you call it as a no call, no show.
Okay.
The person just disappears. Then there is nothing much that you can do. You are supposed to be sending 3 summons within a period of 15 days. And if the person doesn't respond, then you close the case, without the person being there, you cannot continue with the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, Krishna Kumar. Can't hear you. Can you type? Amitabh can read it out for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Yeah, Amitabh, I think we have 2 people who have raised their hand.
We have, if they can just, put it in the chat box, that will be easier instead of, trying to unmute everyone. And because we are at the time is almost over now. Yeah. Ma'am, can you just type in your questions in the chat box? That will make it easier for us to answer. Okay, a very interesting question about the extension of the workplace. If I don't have a physical office and I have people working from home, and the employee is still register the complaint under POSH Act?
Yes. Classic case is what we had in the last 2 years. We were all working virtually. We were not working in a physical environment, right? But it still holds good.
Yeah.
Krishna Kumar had a question, Amitabh. If
And
he has
one more
texted.
question. I think he can type it out or we can take it up
Yeah,
later.
sure.
And because all those who are coming in, I think we are already almost the time is over. And so one question is, what if a complainant decides to take back the complaint after the investigation is initiated? During the any phase of investigation or?
Yeah, the complainant has a right to withdraw a complaint at any stage, but the internal committee should definitely meet the quorum. The quorum is the team one selects from the internal committee who does a particular investigation. So the quorum which is handling this case will figure out if there is any untoward duress that the person is facing outside office or in the office, and then take cognizance of that fact and then agree to the withdrawal, not otherwise.
There is one more question, and I think that would be the last question for this session.
Sure.
And so the question is, can an old complaint be taken that is taken beyond 6 months? I'm not very sure about the context, but typically after the complaint is registered, as many as explained, the investigation has to be closed in 3 months. If it is getting extended, if it is taking 6 months.
Okay, so since we have so many questions on the time frame, Amitabh, since there are so many questions on the time frame, let me take them through this slide on time frame.
Yeah.
This is the time frame which is defined by law.
Yeah.
A complainant can submit a complaint within 90 days of the last incident occurred. I could be facing the harassment for the last 6 months, but if the last case incident happened, say 90 days back, I can still go and complain within 90 days of the last incident occurred. When the committee receives the complaint, the respondent needs to be intimated about this complaint within 7 days. And the respondent has to reply with his stand on this complaint within 10 days. Committee is supposed to be completing the inquiry within 90 days. And submission of the report by the committee post-investigation is within 10 days. After the recommendation comes to the management, implementation of the recommendation without tweaking the recommendation, the management has to execute the recommendation within 60 days. The complaint after investigation, the report has to be shared both with the complainant and the respondent, and they have a right to appeal. And that right to appeal has to happen within 90 days of the recommendation given by the committee post the investigation. So every organization is governed on these time frames.
I think we can stop the questions now.
I think we can stop the questions.
Yes.
And because this is the end of it, we have already exceeded the time and defined. So thank you, Mini, for wonderful explanation.
My pleasure. Really
and although
enjoyed
it's a very complex, question which is there, and law is simple, but yes, the implementation and is always complex, and there are so many different scenarios which keeps on coming up. Thank you for covering both the legal aspect and the software aspect of how to handling it. And
Thank you.
it was wonderful having a conversation with you. Over to you, Neetu.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
While we conclude, can you please put the same slide on, which has a timeline? I was just making my notes while looking at it.
1 minute, Abhishek.
Yes.
I think once we put up the the video will be up on YouTube also. You can check it there also.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
We'll also try and share this particular slide in the WhatsApp group so that you can also take it from there. Again, inviting everybody to join the WhatsApp group so you can continue some more asking your questions. It will the idea of it is that we should not just restrict ourselves in this 1.5 hours that we are. We would like to continue having these questions, and I'm sure some of you have a lot more questions you can ask. Also, Mini, if you can share your contact details, yours and Amitabh, so whoever wants to reach out to them independently, or you can also reach out to them.
Yeah,
that's Mini's email ID at HRPros.in, or you can also find her on LinkedIn as Mini Nilkund, and Amitabh's email ID is amitabh at HRPros.in, and you can also find him on LinkedIn as Amitabh Kumar 27. Right. With that, I would also like to take this opportunity to invite you to register for the next webinar. This is on the business model canvas. And we are going to be talking about how can you master the business model canvas. It is applicable to entrepreneurs, leadership teams, and P&L heads of organizations. We will be covering about the various the BMC blocks with a case study, and also how SMEs and growth phase organizations along with startups can use this in their business. This is happening on the 15th of December. It is an online webinar, and the registration details are there in the chat with you. But you can also find this as bit.ly/HRPros-business model. So we look forward to seeing you again next month. We conduct at least 2 webinars per month. December, we're doing only one because it's the holiday season, but every month we are conducting 2 such knowledge series, and we will keep posting about them in the WhatsApp and on the LinkedIn. So please follow us on LinkedIn, on YouTube channels. Again, all the links are available on the chat. Do take some time and save the chat so that you can access this also. Thank you very much. With that, Mini, if you can stop sharing the.
Yeah.
I think if I would like to see if somebody, if everybody here could share their experience about the webinar, and if there are anything else that you would like us to do, any other topic, like Amitabh said, is there any other topic that you would like to include for our upcoming webinars? Please feel free to share that today. Could I also request everyone to switch on their video so we can see you when we're talking?
Neetu ma'am, this is Abdul here. I somehow feel that, the session or the slides were not, we couldn't complete the entire set of slides. So I was just thinking whether there could be a follow-up on this session on this particular topic. I'm not sure about it, but just sharing my thoughts.
Abdul, we did cover the entire slides.
Okay.
The 2 slides that you saw which are missing were the questions that we generally get to hear during my training, whether it is a committee training or awareness. So we thought, in case the questions do not get asked by the audience, then we could always take you through those questions. But the audience asked much more, and it was so interactive. So the 2 slides that you saw which were missed were basically questions, ready questions, which I get during my training. So you all were so interactive. It was amazing. I really loved taking this session for all of you.
And again, you're welcome, Abdul, to ask more questions. So like we said, we love questions. We love that.
And
so
in fact, at the end of the session, I thought we'll have a quick 2-minute drum circle or a drum jam, but since time is out, we probably can do it next time.
Okay. Yes, hopefully next time. Join us. We'll keep an extra minute or 2 for that. Anybody else would like to share their experience of the webinar today?
I think it was quite good, interesting that so many questions have come up. Logically saying, I have conducted multiple sessions for my employees, but the kind of questions which has come, it has actually given me a different overview of things, which probably I have not thought of. And then it's good. So I've made my notes, and that's where I was asking you to go back to the slides. It's
No problem.
really, really good. And I'm looking forward for probably participating in other sessions as well.
Wonderful, Abhishek. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
So we'll keep interacting on the WhatsApp group that Neetu mentioned.
Yes.
Please do ask questions, and I would be more than happy to respond on your questions.
Yes. And another common thing which I got to realize, that me and Amitabh are already connected through a different group. In fact, we
Acha.
have exchanged a couple of messages over the WhatsApp, which I
Acha.
am realizing now.
Oh,
Small
wonderful.
world. It's
a
No,
small
you
world,
give us,
right?
send us a hi again, and we will again, but okay.
Yes, Amitabh.
Thank you.
We
Thank
have
you.
Sumit mentioning that covered a lot in the limited time. Many thanks. We have Rekha saying this is really a knowledgeable webinar, very nicely structured and framed by HRPros. Thank you so much for that. Okay. Anybody else would like to share? We are
Can I
here
just add?
to
I think
attend.
Yes,
Cherian, yeah.
Nidhi.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry.
Kiran, we want you to talk. I'm not going to read out yours.
So basically, Mini, I think, ma'am, you took the questions very nicely, very informative. I think the way you have answered these questions, I've attended many webinars, but I would rate you the best out of all the speakers that
Thank you. Thank you so
webinar
much.
have gone
That
You
through.
made my
deserves a
day,
clap.
Nidhi.
Yes.
Thanks a lot.
So our recommendation, this Cherian from HRPros, is that we have a YouTube channel, we have a LinkedIn channel, and we have the WhatsApp group. So request all of you who participate to join those groups so that you constantly stay updated with all that we keep sharing. Even the video of today's session will be up there on the YouTube.
Yes.
So if you missed out catching some point, you can listen to the video once again. So please become part of our community. I think you'll keep learning all the time, something new. Thank you.
Thank you.
Aditi, you had your hands up.
No, it was supposed to be a clap. I hope.
Oh,
Didn't-
okay. Okay. I thought you wanted to talk. Sorry.
No,
My
no,
bad.
no. I was just appreciating Mini's
Thank
handling
you.
of the session. Amitabh as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've
So
got
let's touch base on WhatsApp, please. I look forward to interacting with all of you over WhatsApp. There'll be a lot of interesting conversations, I'm sure, because POSH is a very intense subject, very intense. So many people who do not understand POSH, they ask me, what do you do, Mini? What is POSH? So it's very, very difficult to explain in a mini sentence, right? Not easy. So I would rather that this conversation we carry forward for the next few days, and I'm here to clarify all your doubts on POSH. Thank you so much for attending this session. I feel very privileged to be conducting this session for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Mini.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amitabh.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Amitabh, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Neetu.
you. I think
Thank
the
you.
pros could
Thank
stay back.
Thank
a
you
little
all.
bit, maybe.
Yeah,
Pros
yeah,
could
yeah.
stay
We'll
back.
ask the pros to stay back, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, all good?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
all
think we're
good,
all
super.
pros, yeah.
Let me
Wonderful.
just stop.
Awesome.